And recording started.
Recording started.
Hello, mate. How are you? You good?
Yeah, well, tickety boo, ready to rock and roll. It's not every day you get to sit in front of 14 drams. Yeah, this is exciting. So, welcome. Here we are again. Welcome to That Boutique Drinks Autumn Selection, Q4 2022. A collection of whiskey, rum, brandy, and we're heading back to Oz for our Return to Oz banner headliners. We have 9 whiskies,
3 rums from Australia, and a 4th you may have come across before from Thailand.
and a brandy that we're very excited to tell you about. There are 6 brand new whiskey distilleries that we've never bottled before. New casks from 2 distilleries from our first Australian series, and a new cask from the very, very first Australian whiskey we bottled way back in 2015. There's a new Australian rye whiskey, 8 Australian single malts, and 2 of which are peated, and an Australian brandy.
We told you it was exciting.
It's very, very exciting. Now, if you recall, our first collection of Australian whiskies had the Southern Cross constellation theme running through the collection of labels. There was also a little lark on each of the labels where we sort of celebrated the godfather of modern Australian whiskey, Bill Lark, who had played an important part in the distillery's history. Well, we needed a new theme for this second collection of Australian whiskies. And as Australia seems to have the majority of the most dangerous animals, insects, reptiles in the world, for our Return to Oz collection, we've decided to assign each label with a deadly animal that can be found around the area where each of the distilleries are located.
There are some pretty nasty buggers that you really don't want to get too near to if you're heading to Australia. But we've got a lot to get through, so let's get on with the tasting and start with a couple of whiskies.
Yes, let's do that.
Right, yeah, right, we go. Boom.
Seamless. Well, I said let's start with a couple of whiskies, but we're actually going to start with a brandy. Now, this is a 9-year-old brandy from a distillery on Tasmania called Sullivan's Cove. So that boutique brandy company, that's a 9-year-old whiskey, rum, brandy even, crikey. You wait almost 10 years for that boutique brandy to come along, and then you get 2 presented in quick succession. Yes, we introduced that boutique brandy company, albeit with a Calvados, in our last collection. This time it is a brandy from the much lauded Sullivan's Cove distillery. As I mentioned, it's a 9-year-old, a recommended retail price of £160, £159.95. Now, Sullivan's Cove in Tasmania could hardly be further away from Scotland, but in double quick time, it has established a record that most distilleries around the globe would really envy. They came onto the scene in the UK in 2014. Everything they do is a single cask expression. And when they won the world's best whiskey in 2014, it really just sort of blew them apart because they just weren't able to keep up with everybody's demand. Now, our label story, and here it's a label from our in-house brandy company label artist Toby Dowling. It really just shows our distillery manager Heather Tillett standing proudly in front of the rows of grapes, which are the grapes they're using: Pinot Noir, Cabernet. I can't read them on there. But yeah, the grapes that they're using. In the background, stretching off into the horizon, in the background there's the iconic Mount Wellington, and flying overhead is a swift parrot, which is a native bird to that part of Tasmania. Now, if you look carefully on there, there's a little pin on Heather's shirt, and that's their still. They have a single still, and that's called Myrtle. And our deadly animal, you can just see it lurking in the vines there. It's the tiger snake. A large and highly venomous snake of southern Australia, including the coastal islands and Tasmania. I hope Heather sees it before it sees her. Now, this has been bottled at 66.5% ABV, and we're expecting around 198 bottles to be available. So this is natural cask strength, as you can see with the little gold triangle in the corner. Now, what's it like? Now, this is incredibly, incredibly rich, dense on the nose. There's loads of aged brandy notes. It's spicy oak, it's wet earth, it's baking spices and maple syrup. There's lots and lots of dried fruit too. There's spices like clove and licorice and a hint of my black cherry pipe tobacco. Now, I think this could do with a little touch of water, personally.
Yeah, try it. Definitely try it at a cask, but a little splash just to kind of open it, I think.
Sharp spices. It's rich, sweet oak and toffee and dark chocolate. There's a little bit of that sort of light wood smoke char. And there's a really nice bit of rancio going on in there. The finish is deep and it's long lasting. Just a cracking way to start off. I'm expecting a lot of love for this. Sullivan's Cove, whenever it comes out, there's a lot of love for it. It disappears very, very quickly, even at the prices it are. And this is a 9-year-old. It's pretty old for anything from Australia, to be honest. A cracking start.
That's a pretty fine place to go.
That's a big brandy to start the tasting, I know, but I wanted to get it in right at the beginning because I think it sits best there. And then we're going to go for a little palate cleanser. With our first whiskey of this series from Australia, The Gospel, as a 3-year-old rye whiskey from a distillery that's set in the back streets of Melbourne's sort of eclectic Brunswick neighbourhood. It's a 3-year-old Australian rye that started life in a new American oak cask, just as it would be specified for a US whiskey. However, our cask has then been given an Australian red wine cask finish, which adds a real fruity dimension to this rye whiskey. Now, it is distilled from 100% Australian unmalted rye, which has been cultivated and nurtured by a single farmer in the Murray-Mallee region of South Australia. Again, it's bottled at natural cask strength. This is 58.6% ABV, and we're expecting around 389 bottles to be available. Now, this distillery was founded by Ben Bowles and Andrew Fitzgerald, both passionate distillers, and they really went for a whole series of trial and error before they decided that it was rye whiskey that they were going to. They tried malts, they tried different things, they built their own stills. But they have this love for American rye whiskies. So that's what they settled on. And they settled on using unmalted rye from a single farm, which borders sort of Victoria, South Australia. Now, that distillery is really now specifically set up and designed to tackle the challenges encountered when distilling rye whiskey. It is a beautiful, beautiful rye. Now, our label story, it looks a little bit like their story in a tapestry, a modern satirical version, perhaps, of the Bayeux tapestry. And we tried to include as many of the stories that the founders, Ben and Andrew, told us about a still blowing up, almost blowing up when they tried to do it, about them erecting their column still themselves, about putting, clearing the mash filters out by hand themselves because everything had got clogged up, and just lots and lots of experimentation that they went through there. Now, our deadly animal on the Gospel label, you can see pretty clearly there, front and center. It is the Australian saltwater crocodile, or salty, as it's colloquially known. It's one of Australia's most dangerous animals, killing 1 or 2 people every year on average. And what's it like? Well, I think it's rather lovely. I'm a huge rye fan, and this is just spanking. It's buttered, dark rye bread with a hint of spice and light toffee, and all with that sort of underlying cherry compote nose on the nose. The palate is full of those rye bread notes with caramel, vanilla, sweet allspice, spices like clove and pepper, and then that little bit of red fruit coming through from that red wine cask.
That's lovely. It's so good. Definitely rye in it. Can't miss the rye, but the fruit note on it, very, very good cask finish on that one, I think.
Yeah,
really
it's
good.
Absolutely superb. It's one of my. I'm a big rye fan, and they've really they've really hit that one, and that putting it into that red wine cask to finish it.
But that's a lot. 3 years, a 3-year-old.
Yeah,
that's achieved a lot in a very short space of time.
Rye whiskey generally does go pretty quickly, and you know it starts off in a new oak cask, and so you've got that full oak cask rather than a used oak cask. It's got all that new oak coming through. Yeah, it's a cracking rye.
Beautiful fruit note, lovely. I've got to keep some of this back. Pete, don't drink it all. Don't drink it all. Not too early anyway. Long way to go yet. Right. Oh my God.
Rum, I guess.
Should we do a rum? Let's do a rum. So, yeah, we've. If you're driving the slides, I'll talk about the rum. So, yeah, we've got a welcome return to a rum produced from our first Aussie release in the former Blackgate Distillery, which apologies, I upset people all around the world, but it's situated in Menduran, I believe they say it, in central New South Wales. In actual fact, and this is between you and I, we'd actually held back a little bit of the original liquid from the first release. And are using this as an opportunity to release this one at a beefier 57.2. The first batch one was at 50%. Husband and wife team of Brian and Janice Hollingworth are well known for their whiskey, but have been making rum for a while now and use Queensland molasses in a long fermentation process, something like 12 days, I think, and then double distill in their direct fired pot stills. And that's like, I love the idea of this direct fired pot stills. We don't see enough of those. And you only have to get the rum in your glass, which I really should do. Clink for this one. To realise this spirit has been subjected to those Maillard reactions. You know, there's cooked notes that add a lovely richness to the flavour. I'll just prepping that one there. So it's a robust pot still distilled rum, which was then aged for 3 years in small. These are like 100 litre tawny wine casks, which is the Aussie equivalent of port wine. And you know what? I think all of this, like all of those things bring together, I'm going to say it, ginger cake, kind of sticky ginger cake on the nose.
Yeah.
Loads of dried stone fruits in there. And to be fair, there's something else. There's another thing I was fretting over this for quite a long time, but like I'm getting a chili powder kind of note in the finish. There's a kind of a sort of a chili warmth, but there's another thing, and I can't quite put my finger on what it is. And it was teasing me as I was trying to be exploring it the other night. By the way,
that's bad.
It really is. It's rich and mouthfilling and yum 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 yum, and it is sufficiently different from batch one to make people want to look this one out. So our batch 2 label is an adaptation, as you'd expect, to batch 1. In this case, Frankie the Dachshund is chasing some kangaroos away. But it's a little homage to the. Always like these distilleries always kind of feel like they're right out in the middle of nowhere, and they have to deal with nature in a way that we don't have to here in the UK, quite to the same level anyway. Yeah. This one is a little bit more expensive than batch 1. Matches revenue and customs demand tribute after all, and quite a few things have changed over the last couple of years. We don't have to talk about those now, but I think this really is a beaut, and it's in your glass for 75 quid and just around. So batch 2 Blackgate 3-year-old 57.2% ABV, an RRP of £74.95.
Lovely stuff. Can't argue with that.
I don't think so.
Okay, back on the whiskey trail, we're going to head to a distillery. Now, Launceston, we would call it Launceston over here. Launceston, I think it's Launceston in Tasmania. And if you are local down in Cornwall, you call it something like Lamson. When you go down to Cornwall and you call it Launceston, you instantly identify yourself as a tourist because they all call it Launceston or something like that. So the Launceston, I'm going to call it Launceston, but I think it's Launceston Distillery, was established by a group of 5 friends and investors in 2013. This is the first Launceston I've ever seen over here. So it's a new whiskey discovery for me. Now, after much hard work, it commenced whiskey production in 2015. The distillery is located in the historic Hangar 17 at Launceston Airport, which was built in 1932. Hangar 17 is the oldest surviving aviation building in Tasmania. It was used as a passenger departure point up until the current terminal was built in 1968. Ex-brewer and Tasmanian local Chris Condon stepped up to be their distiller. Now, Chris is followed everywhere by his companion, Angus the Westie. And he has this little dog, the Westie, has supervised operations at 2 distilleries and lays claim to being Tasmania's most experienced whiskey distillery dog. There you go. The stills and brewing equipment were all manufactured in Hobart, with the heads of both stills having distinctive reflux balls to produce a smooth, refined spirit, a much lighter spirit. They've got stills with the boil ball in them, which lighten that spirit, gives the spirit a lot more reflux, like lots of the distilleries in Scotland have. But they are clad. They're really interesting stills. If you can see them on their website, they're actually clad with Tasmanian oak, so for heat retention in there as well. They look beautiful. They're all oak clad around the outside. The water is drawn from the local South Esk River, which is the longest running river in Tasmania. And all of the barley used is grown in the north of Tasmania. So local ingredients, local people, local production, and everything is matured in Hangar 17 too. Now, our Launceston is a 5-year-old single malt. It's been matured in an ex-bourbon barrel, much like a lot of Scotch whiskies. And we've bottled this. I don't see not natural cask strength on. Yes, there is an NCS on there. It is natural cask strength. I can just see it up in that corner there at 62.6% ABV. And we're expecting just 140 bottles from this. Oh, it is good. Now, our label story, well, we had to have Angus the Westie involved. So we have Angus in a suit interviewing a Tasmanian devil for the job as a distillery security. And there's some pretty amusing interview questions up there on the label. I'm not going to read out right now. You can get them and have a look up a bit closer in the deck a little bit later. Now, you might think that the Tasmanian devil is our deadly animal, but no, we went for the Ricky Ponton. Our deadly animal on this label is the Ricky Ponton, an Australian cricket captain, the most successful captain in international cricket history. And we wanted to portray him in his green and gold baggy in that little picture up in the top left there. But, you know, that was a little bit too much of a likeness and didn't think we could get away with that way. So what we're doing, we couldn't portray him directly on the label. So we're referencing his early days as an Aussie rules footy player in the green and gold. Because up until he was 14, during the winter months, he played junior football for North Launceston. Right up until he was 14, he could have been a possible sporting option. He was a very good player until a serious right arm break while playing for the under-17s as a 13-year-old. His arm was so badly broken, it had to be pinned. He was told to endure a 14-week layoff, and he never played competitive football again. So we have him there as sort of an Aussie rules punting the ball there, punting. It's shockingly bad puns, but he is a deadly animal. He's deadly to the England cricket team, that's for sure.
Oh, don't, mate, don't. I didn't know that was coming.
Now, this is just beautiful. I think it needs a tad water. It does come across lovely at cask strength, but it really does open up.
Very nice.
Which means you get a lot more for your bucks, because this is 5-year-old is $149.95 is our recommended retail price. What's it like? Custard cream biscuits with a hint of green banana and charred pineapples on the nose. There's more sweeter banana notes that come through, certainly with more water, caramelized brown sugar, and that sort of spicy, leafy herbal note. Medium length finish, and that's sort of that lingering spicy vanilla sweetness. It's very, very good. It's a very, very good quality whiskey.
I wouldn't have pinned it at 5. I thought it was older, if I had to guess. But it is a lovely creaminess to this. From the nose onto the palate and through, it's just beautifully consistent.
Aye. It's a wee cracker. So yes, it's the one with So the most traditional casks, if we're running through the lineup here, most of the Australian whiskey industry do use a lot of their ex-wine and sherry and port casks, Apera and Tawny, as we will see going forward, because they have this big wine-making industry. So they get these. This is a ex-bourbon barrel, first fill ex-bourbon barrel, lots of flavours from that first fill quality whiskey.
Can't believe he did the Ricky Ponting though.
Yeah.
Why didn't he stay? I kind of bit me wishes he'd stayed with the footy, but of course the other part, we've had some fun over the years. And of course, it was nice to see him beaten. Oh,
okay, our next whiskey is right from the other side of Australia, right from the western side. Lime Burners. It's a 5-year-old, another 145-pound whiskey. Now I've tried some Lime Burners when they first made a little sort of foray into English whiskey scene quite a few years ago, and I can tell you I was really impressed with the whiskies. Most of them were all single cask releases, and so it's really exciting to have some of this in a boutique bottle. The Lime Burners distillery is in the southwestern corner of Western Australia in the Margaret River region. The area is famous for wine production and also hosts an annual event of the World Surf League over there. Now, their distillery site was chosen for its cooler climate and access to high-quality water. Pretty crucial ingredients, really. It's founded by a lawyer, Cameron Syme, and that's him there on the label going, nope, in his best Australian accent. And the parent company, the Great Southern Distilling, operates 3 distilleries in the region now, making gin, malt, grain, and rye whiskey, with Lime Burners being the brand which is almost on the beach for their single malt whiskey. So it's a very small distillery with an annual capacity of just 120,000 litres of pure alcohol per year. All of the grain they use comes from Western Australia, and generally their spirit is matured in second fill American oak bourbon barrels, with some expressions finished in Australian fortified wine barrels, which is what I'm talking about there, Apera and Tawny's. Interestingly, they have a peated whiskey, which is made using locally sourced peat from the Valley of the Giants in nearby Walpole. Now, ours is not peated. It is a single malt, 5 years old. It's been matured in an ex-Pedro Jimenez Apera cask. So big, bold, sweet flavours, and we have bottled this at 51.5% ABV, and we're expecting just 334 bottles to be available. So effectively, this is a PX sherry cask, but obviously it's not called sherry. I think they stopped calling it sherry in Australia fairly recently. In fact, most Australians still call it sherry in port, but they're legally not allowed to because it's protected by the regions that make sherry and port. Now, our label's got a great story. It's in the cracking golden green label of Australia. And it plays on a hilarious story we are told, really, where the distillery founder, Cameron, basically told Tony Abbott to go stuff himself. The Australian Prime Minister at the time, he called up the distillery and a representative of the Prime Minister's office called up the distillery and said, I want another bottle of that whiskey, please. Can you send me one? Now, this bottle of whiskey that they make was an exclusive distillery release that was only given to the Australian Special Air Force. And so you couldn't buy it, but obviously the SAS had given the Prime Minister a bottle. It was his favourite bottle, and he wanted to get another one. So he just thought, well, I'll just call up the distillery and get them. And the distillery told them, or Cameron told them, to basically get stuffed. So we made a play on the Obama label with Hope up there, down to Nope. And of course, we have got lots of shockingly bad lime puns on there. Tried our limes. Call, this lime ain't for sale. It's another play on that. Nope. Our deadly animal on here, which you can clearly see in the middle there, a little cartoon, is the box jellyfish, so named for its shape. It's considered to be the most venomous marine animal. It's long, barbed tentacles that are covered in pockets of venom. And when injected into people or animals, it can lead to paralysis, cardiac arrest, and death. So, yeah, one of those lovely little deadly animals from Australia. It is glorious. They do make a very, very good spirit. This is, say, a PX cask.
I know we've been talking lime burners, mate. We've been lime, but I can't help but shift a kind of a green, viney, kind of limey kind of vibe running through it as well. Power suggestion, perhaps, but like that is lovely.
So rich and oily, and it's raisin and molasses and sort of cherry syrup. Just getting some black curranty, blackberry jam there on this time around. But there's some savoury notes too, so that sort of pepper, ancho pepper, and bitter dark chocolate. And then right at the end, and it really does come, it's sort of a little floral lavender note comes through, which is quite pleasant, certainly in the empty glass. Again, on the palate, it really is rich and weighty, but it's beautifully balanced at the same time. No water to this one at 51.5% ABV. Lots of chocolatey notes, as you'd expect from sort of a PX cask. Fruity chocolate, mole sauce, black cherry, tobacco notes. And that finish sort of lingers. It really is lingering with those sort of chocolatey, spicy, maybe a little bit of chili chocolate coming through there. And then right at the end, that little bit of floral lavender just lingering there. Yeah, delicious, really impressive. Well done, Ryan.
Cool. Well done, that was lovely. Very nice. Again, only a 5-year-old.
Aye.
Maturation seems to happen a lot more, you get a lot more intensity, a lot more quickly, it seems, in Oz. What a great location.
It does seem that the temperate climates that they have there, the warmer, the higher highs, and maybe they do have a little bit of a lower low. I don't think they have a lower low than Scotland, but they do seem to mature pretty quickly. Very
nice. Very nice. Very, very nice. Should we have a rum?
That sounds like a cracking idea. I'm looking forward to this one because you
I know we were talking off air, and just saying how excited I was about this one. I'm excited about all of them. I love all of the rums, but particularly this one was just a quirk of fate. We'll come to that. So we've got a brand new producer to bring to the release in the form of Mount Uncle, and they're situated in Walkerman in far north Queensland. And it does feel like I get a sense of, I know Queensland's a big place, but make a point of saying it's in the far north Queensland. It kind of feels like that's a region within a region within a region kind of thing, This is a well-established distillery, actually. It was built in 2001, produces a number of different spirits, gin, vodka, and whiskey. So, maybe one for a Return Towards Part 3, as well as liqueurs. And they're also making an agave spirit. Obviously not tequila. It's made in Australia from locally sourced, but, and they're also making rum. So they currently offer a 10-year-old in their range. They have an unaged, a 5, and a 10. So, they've got a well-established rum producing setup. And we're really lucky to have access to this. This is a long-age rum for our Return Towards release. I'm honestly particularly excited about this. The troubles of the last few years means that, keep saying COVID and the rest of it, blah, blah, blah. But that Mark Watkins, the founder, we'll come to in a moment, actually kind of lost sight of this cask. It was the back of the warehouse. Times passed. He's down there. He's having a rummage around. Finds this 12-year-old cask. It's completely fluky chance of timing. I dropped him a line. I said, can we, be nice to kind of do a little project? He goes, well, funny you should say that. We've just found this. Lucky for me, lucky for all of us, I reckon. So Mount Uncle Distillery founder Mark Watkins, who's actually, I was judging spirits when I first met him. I was judging spirits with him a few years ago in London. Sources his sugarcane juice syrup. So this is brand new for us. This is our first syrup as a point of origin for the rum from a local sugar factory. So the world of rum, sugarcane juice. We've got ones like that. We've got ones from molasses, the other end of the sugar thing. But this is a syrup. So this is the juice boiled down before it then goes through the centrifuges and things like that to make sugar. From this, he ferments the syrup. So you add a bit of water, you ferment, and then pot still distills his rum. So neither sugarcane juice nor molasses in origin, but properly a rum. 12 years of maturation in an red wine cask that was heavily toasted prior to. Let me just, I'm going to pour some because I was in danger. I've got to say, MPD send me a few samples of this. I did drink more than the first one when I was doing the tasting notes because I was enjoying myself so much while I was drinking it. 12 years maturation, red wine cask. This is like this is just so fruity. It's so jammy. It's so lovely. You know, and honestly, I just can't get enough of this one. I kind of I sort of don't buy it, leave it for me. But like, I suppose, yeah, sort of jokes aside, there is enough for everyone. All the rum kind of geeks, but like,
It's lovely.
you know, for me, honestly, lots of sweet ripe fruits in this one. Mango, Victoria plum. There's a kind of I was getting this after a few sips. I was getting a kind of a sherbety kind of top note on the rum as well. It was just lovely. It's got a kind of a tart, delicately spiced finish. I think absolutely glorious, and riot on the palate. It's just fantastic. This is say 12 years old, presented at a full strength, 64.9% ABV. All for 80 quid, which I think is a bargain. As we've been mentioning before, I think maybe a little drop of water with this one won't do any harm at all. Will just kind of help to release. And at 64.9, you can sacrifice a little bit of ABV to get it.
That sherbet note really comes off with a bit of water. It really does that. Sherbet dabs.
It's lovely. Honestly, I think it's just wonderful. It's And there's the thing I don't yum. It's so good. I'm going to need more tasting drams of this for sure when we come around to launching it. Label design. I kind of I had a call in with Mark. It was late one night. It was from late very night for me. Mark he was there. It was a distillery. He was setting up a still. The rest of it, we had a little Zoom kind of thing, and we were chatting. You know, he talked about where he was. And while we were chatting, he I don't know how it came up in conversation. He pulled out a huge long barrel pistol thing that he uses for pest control. Kind of like, again, full Aussie. Yeah. I mean, sort of complemented with when I read that this is the distillery is situated on the Alton tableland, and they describe it as a fertile plateau. I just couldn't help but think of like that film, the 1960s film 1 Million Years BC. The one with Raquel Welch on the cover. You have to be of a certain age to understand it, I think, to be fair. And, I probably am. But it's like Raquel Welch is on the cover of this film thing, and there's all these monsters running around in the background. And I just kind of thought, you know what, that's the one. So there's no super hidden meaning within this rum label. It's just to say, like, that's Mark on the front. It's a pretty good realization by our artist. But, and to be fair, when you look at the area, it's not a barren desert. It is actually a very fertile plateau. There's lots of things going on in that area. But, this is a well-established rum producer of the modern era, making some fantastic liquid. And honestly, I'm going to really fight to not drink the rest of that right this minute.
That's very good.
64.9. 80 quid. Get some in early before I buy all of it, because I really am going to be seeking this one down. I want a case of this for Pete, for me, for future.
Very, very good. Okay, moving swiftly on. It is time for another new whiskey discovery for me. I've never heard of this little distillery, the Tria Prima Distillery. This is a 2-year-old, so it's going to be one of our boutique malt company releases. 2-year-old is a whiskey in Australia. The quality of this is, for 2 years old, is simply stunning. High RRP, £140. It is a nano distillery. We talk about small distilleries. This is a nano distillery. It's run by an Englishman and a boutique whiskey fan, Paul Shand, and his wife Trang. In 2017, they founded their distillery in Mount Barker, up in the picturesque Adelaide Hills, and launching their first whiskies just last year, to 2021. Now, Paul had to sell his whiskey collection to fund the purchase of his distillery equipment. So this 2-year-old single malt will obviously be the first independently bottled Tria Prima, and it's a whiskey by Australian definition, as I mentioned. Now, this has been matured in first fill Grant Berg Tawny. So it's an Aussie port cask. The name Grant Berg has come up, and it's like a very fine winery in Australia. We bottled this at 51.2% ABV, and we're expecting just 183 bottles to be available. Now, our label story, I love this label. It's a fabulous little label here, sort of a play on the Tria Prima. The 3 primary qualities of alchemy was held in high esteem by the greats of alchemy and a key to the secret of the philosopher's stone. It's something he plays around with his labels as well. And so that distillery name represents the three elements of whiskey alchemy: barley, water, and wood. So that's Paul, dressed as our wizard on the label, conjuring up a diagram of the water cycle and the whiskey cycle there, with a few other little bits and pieces thrown in there. Our deadly animal is sitting there on Paul's shoulder, one of the most venomous marine animals, the blue-ringed octopus. There is no anti-venom available for the blue-ringed octopus, nothing. And it's a lovely little tiny that you can play with. It's very docile and quite playful. And I've seen this on videos of people playing with this thing and not realizing how deadly this bloody thing, if you upset it. Yeah, it'd be painful. Now this is a port cask, a tawny Aussie port. And it really is rich and fruity on the nose. Lots of plum, a little bit of apricot there, lots of dried fruit, sultanas, raisin, peel, sweet caramel, toffee, and there's a little bit of that nuttiness coming through. Really rich, mouth-filling. Again, quite fruity, more sort of figs and dried plums. And then leading to that sort of high cocoa content, dark chocolate, that little bit of bitterness coming through, followed by sort of a savory note, sort of balsamic rub, balsamic barbecue sauce like almost coming through there. Lots of fruit and nut and chocolate in the finish, and then it just starts to go dry as right at the very end. It just starts to suck all the moisture out of your tongue. Absolutely stunning for a 2-year-old whiskey. Man, he's doing some very good stuff.
I can't believe that's 2. I really can't believe that's a 2-year-old. There's got to be he's conning you. Got to be. Is there a tax thing or something? Like if we make it younger, we get a tax thing or something? That's amazing. That is delish.
A tiny little distillery. So like I say, it's a nano distillery, and yeah, it's something you won't see outside of the region, which is why we were excited to have it in our collection, and I'm hoping the whiskey geeks will really love this stuff. It is absolutely delicious. I've got another new distillery for us next. Another distillery I hadn't heard of. I'm going to have difficulty saying Carrara. Carrara. It's another new whiskey discovery. It's a distillery that was founded in 12 years ago, 2010, and it's been built in an old flour mill that was built in 1924 in the heartlands of New South Wales, on the banks of the Murray River. So it is an old flour mill. It went into disrepair. So it's a heritage-listed 1920s flour mill that was more or less derelict when Dean Drees and his father Neil bought it for $1 Aussie back in 1990. So they picked this derelict building up for $1, and that's what we've got to play on the label there with this big comedy check of $1. Dean's family are long-time grain farmers who previously purchased a flour mill 2 hours north of Carrara in Junee and transformed it into a licorice and chocolate factory. Carrara is surrounded by the Rutherglen wine region, home to many fortified winemakers and the source of many of their barrels. And it's also an area north of the distillery is renowned grain growing region. Dean's grandfather is the pioneer of organic grain farming in Australia. All of the barley is sourced from either Drees' own farms or local farms in the area. The majority of the workforce at the distillery are all under 30 years old, and the distillery has just a capacity of just 370,000 litres of pure alcohol a year. So it's still really quite small. Now, this is a 4-year-old single malt whiskey. It's been matured in another ex-tawny cask, which you can see by a beautiful colour. It's been bottled at 48.5%, and we're expecting around 520 bottles of this. This is going to retail at $109.95. We've got a lot going on this label here. So it's representing the distillery team. This is the distillery team. You can see Dean handing the check over to the local councillor, this comedy check for $1, which they have actually framed in the distillery. and his distiller there with the dreadlocks there, and the rest of the team, they're all playing Aussie rules because Aussie rules is a big part of their life in this area. There's a lark on here somewhere. There's a little nod to Bill Lark again. There's pigeon crapping on the councillor's head. You can see a little bit of pigeon poop coming down there. And our deadly animal, you can just see it there on the bottom between the feet of the footy players. It is the Aussie funnel web spider, one of the most medically significant groups of spiders in the world, and are regarded by some to be the most deadly in terms of clinical cases and venom toxicity. Yes.
It's easy for you to say, mate.
Easy for me to say. And this has got lots of that sort of toasted, grainy, really grainy, rich, dark marmalade sort of note. Yeah, big toasty notes for me.
Yum, 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 yum.
And a little bit of dark chili chocolate coming through, those woody spices.
Yeah. That is good.
It is good, isn't it?
That really is, yeah.
I don't think it needs any water. We've got, say, 48.5. I'm just going to put a drop in there because those marmalade notes really do come out, as do the chocolates, and a little bit of sour cherry. And, yeah, those port wine notes, tawny wine notes, are really bringing that chocolate to life. Oh, so chocolatey.
There really is no neutral spirit in Australia, is it? It's full flavour or nothing. Yum, yum, yum.
Very, very good. I love it.
We should, off air, mate, you and I should just take a little bit of time over this one, I think. Just it's too much for a few minutes on this kind of recording. We need a bit more time in your glass for this one, don't we?
Yeah, it's very good.
Very, very nice.
It must be time for another rum. 2 whiskies and a rum.
Bloody hell, really? Wow, excuse me, I'm French. We are rushing through this one. We are doing very well, actually. We're not doing too bad at all. Right, so another brand new bottling for Boutique Rum. We're pushing the rum map a little bit further out. Regrettably, with this one, we cannot disclose the producer for this one. This is our secret distillery number 8, up to number 8 in the series. Let's find an appropriate receptacle to put this in. I'll do. Cool. So we can't name it from the producer point of view. The name is licensed, and quite rightly so. You know, rum producers particularly need to and get on over. Pete, get off the soapbox. Get off the soapbox. Stop. Blah, blah. It's entirely laudable that people should use their name appropriately in this situation. But I can say that it can be found in Eagleby in Queensland, and it is the oldest operating distillery in Australia. And if that's not giving away quite a lot by saying that, then I can also say, and it's important, this is not Bundaberg, because most people when they think of Aussie rum, they think of Bundaberg. However, I'm just going to throw it out there. One more clue. I'm going to say that the producer's name does begin with a B, and I hope that I don't get in trouble with legal for laying all that information out. Basically, if you don't get it after all this, then Google will help for sure. This is wonderful. This is again, we got a lovely long age rum. This is such a safe bet. The last one, Matt Uncle, was such a safe bet. Secret Distillery number 8. Batch 1, 14 years old, 65.7% ABV. This is a super safe bet. This rum was distilled in August 2007. And again, a long fermentation process, 12 days, maybe something in that. I think they have a bespoke yeast. The complicated part is that they, like as it turns out, a few others do, they run the wine through a stripping column first. So that comes off the column. It's very low ABV. It's still, it's about removing the kind of solid from it. And then they shape it, in terms of the heads, hearts, and tails in their copper pot still. Now, we make at Boutique Rum, we do make a kind of a thing about the way we talk about classification, because we don't talk about white, gold, and dark rum. We don't, we try and talk about, make our rum conversation more meaningful. And this is one of these situations where the rum world really does kind of make it complicated for classifications, because this situation is like, so what do we call it? Now we're running by the first distillation, so it's kind of column still, and so that's kind of what's on the thing. However, the shape of the rum is very much in a pot still kind of style. Complicated. It's a traditional style of production. It's not unique to them. The Big LZ rum producers, Bundy, that's what they do at their facility, and actually just to kind of put it outside of Australia, Dusa in Venezuela also run their new make wine through the stripping column before then finishing it either further in the column still or in their Vendome or pot stills or whatever it is. So this traditional rum production is the key part of it. I suggest with secret distillery number 8 that we don't focus too much on the classification, try not to kind of judge on that, work on the fact that this has been matured in Australia for 10 years in American oak. This rum was then shipped to the UK for a further 4 years and recast in once used ex-bourbon cask. So that's a total of 14 years before we laid hands on it. Before we come to talking about it, the label, I love this label. This is just a glorious label. Completely, it's like, what is this all about? What is this all about? Lots of history to look up here. Plenty of time to Google it yourself, but it draws on the history of the SS, not the SSS, SS Walrus, a floating sugar mill. Rewind to the 1800s, like Australia was, is a flourishing nation. Equipment is not necessarily easily available. You got to ship things all around the world. Floating sugar mill. So this is servicing farms on the Albert and Logan rivers in Queensland. Moves around between places, The byproduct of sugar production is molasses, and so it turns out the James Stewart, aka the bosun, installed a pot still, which allowed him to use the molasses left over from sugar production to make rum. Kind of, there's lots of rum history. Some things have been shared recently that Australian rum history is something you really need to spend several hours in looking into, and maybe we should do actually. Note to self. But this traveling rum sugar refinery come rum distillery ends up washing up on the shores of a location that then became the producer's distillery of this rum back in 1884. It's kind of like, what can you say that doesn't sort of say it outright, kind of being naughty and all the rest of it? Anyway, whatever it is, it's a fantastic story. There's lots and lots of history to kind of pull up on this one as well. I love the label. I think it's beautiful. And the chap on the front, I got to give him a quick shout out to Simon McGorham. He's our key fella at Atom. He's absolutely top chap. Looks after the entire Asia Pacific kind of region in terms of exports and the customer contact as it is through all those companies, all the countries all around there. But the best part about all of this, backstory and everything else aside, is just glorious.
It is.
As soon as we got it was like, oh my god, this is so complex. It's like, there's a lovely weight to it from the spirit point of view.
Yeah.
But it's just complex. You have to spend time with this. And from a rum geeky kind of point of view, this particular producer has been out. It's becoming more and more famous in the rum world right now through various other sources, which I don't want to say on this one necessarily, but the rum geeks will know this one. Rum geeks are going to look out for this one. You have to get hold of this. It's so good. It really is so good.
Beautiful.
It's complex, more so than we can get on the thing. There's so much fruit. There's like crisp fruit. There's ripe fruit. There's spice. There's a beautiful grip. The ABV is just right for me personally, but for those a little scared of the 60+% ABV, a little dash of water again will further open this up, and it just kind of lingers and it keeps coming and it keeps coming. Yum, yum, yum. And it just keeps coming. It keeps coming. It keeps coming. It's like, oh my god.
Very, very good. That's I can see why we put it here at number 3, because it's building up. And
building up. I mean, it's kind of like we've had this in Bond for a little bit, and I've been waiting to get it out, and I'm glad that the moment has come. This is exactly the right moment to release it into this. We could have released this a couple of years ago. We could have done. However, Return to Oz comes around. A 14-year-old rum that is just so good. Honestly, I couldn't be more excited about this one. And again, like the Mountain Uncle, like the Blackgate, I just love it. I think this is fantastic, and I so want some of this. So
Oh,
be excited, buy some, but don't buy all of it because I need to buy some. I need some of this for the future. This is just delicious. It really is so good. Sorry, I'm gushing. I think
yeah.
it's amazing. 84, 95, 85 quid. Worth
Thank
every
you.
penny. Worth
Absolutely.
every penny.
I love the label too. Yeah.
I love that one as well. It is very, very, very cool. There is that theme about the deadly animals has been continued through. I kind of want to reveal it here. I thought hold that back and talk about it. But there are deadly animals on our labels, on the rum labels as well. Just saying.
Right. Let's move on to another whiskey, and I'm really excited to have this next one. Now this is Overeem. It's a 5-year-old. Recommended retail price is $159.95. Pretty expensive for a 5-year-old whiskey. However, there's a little bit of a history story to tell here, so listen up. Now, Overeem was the first Australian distillery we'd ever bottled, with 2 small batches released back in 2015-16. So it's around the time when Overeem was starting to make a little bit of a play for the UK market. They were making incredibly well-balanced, beautiful whiskies. But yes, they were very expensive then. Founded in 2017 by Casey Overeem. Overeem was the 4th ever whiskey distillery in Tasmania. Casey taught his daughter Jane how to distill, and if you remember, the first Overeem labels that we had was Casey and Jane in their shed distilling. We had them a lovely little label from the first 2 batches, highly sought after. Still today, people are looking for those, and beautiful, beautiful whiskey. So their first releases launched in 2012 with Jane working alongside Casey as the marketing and sales manager. And the brand quickly gained a cult following in Australia and global recognition and praise, which is when we came on to bottle ours in 15 and 16. Then in 2013, Casey retired and the distillery was sold to Lark Distillery. Production of whiskey was eventually moved to Lark, and Jane continued as the sales and marketing manager. Lark was then purchased by Australian Whisky Holdings, a company with a questionable image and reputation. 2 years later, Jane left Lark, and she and her husband, Mark, created the Sawford Distillery under Casey's watchful eye. And then in 2020, much to the whole of the whiskey world's surprise, Jane and Mark announced that they'd reacquired the Overeem brand from Australian Whisky Holdings. And it was sort of, wait, what? That's gone back full circle to the family. And that Casey is continuing as a casual brand ambassador for the new venture. So Overeem is back with a solid pedigree behind it. And there's a new hope. It's a new hope. So this is a 5-year-old single malt whiskey. It's been matured in an ex-Apera cask. It's been bottled at 50% ABV, and we're expecting just 463 bottles of this this whiskey. Now, I mentioned that we'd bottled Overeem before, so we had a label, but it was the old Overeem in the little shed that they started all those years ago. But with all of that history and a new beginning, we thought it deserved a revamp. Now, some of you Star Wars geeks will probably spot that this could be a spoof on the Star Wars A New Hope poster, with the characters replaced by the Overeem team, people involved in their story. And yes, that's me at the back as the Wook. Suitably hairy. I'm much hairier than I normally am, including hairy arms. And the Wook was once my nickname when I was a second-year apprentice in the shipyard. I had long hair, and I was a hairy, and I was called the Wook by my fitter. You can see the stills there and the mash tun as sort of an art. Were they R2D2? The robots.
You are not good at pop culture, are you, mate?
I am not. No. I'm really pleased to say that Jane didn't have a clue on this either. But if you look at a New Hope poster, it's
Don't look for excuses.
We've got Australian Utes there as sort of as a spaceship. We've got Casey there. We've got husband and wife team, Mark and Jane. We've got the players on there. Our deadly animal. We've got Australia as the Death Star in the back. I think that's what it is. Death Star. Is that what it's called? You can see crawling over the back there is our deadly animal, and it is the jack jumper ant. It's a species of venomous ant native to Australia, most frequently found in Tasmania and southeast mainland Australia. I wasn't going to be. I wasn't going to be surprised by the quality of Overeem. Having had Overeem a number of times in the past, I've always been absolutely delighted when it was a Casey and Jane distillery. And this is absolutely everything you want it. As I said, ex-Apara cask, that's sort of a Australian sherry. Chocolatey, dried fruits, hazelnut, spices of nutmeg and cinnamon on the nose, and just a little bit of hint of mint through that chocolate. Not sort of after eight mint chocolate, but a little bit of fresh sort of mint coming through the dark chocolate. And on the palate, it really is viscous and bold and incredibly well balanced. That dark chocolate leaves hazelnuts and raisins, and then just a little bit of peppery spices at the back. It's delicious, deliciously long finish. A cracker. And I love this label, especially when you compare it against the pop culture the poster alongside it. It really does look bloody cool. That's a great likeness of Jane and her husband there as well. Really lovely people. I love the label. Love the whiskey, love the label. Anyway, we're gushing. We need to move on. We've got a few more to get through. Another whiskey. Let's go back to the beach. In a typical Australian scene here, a surf shack with some Chief's Son.
We really could spend hours on this, couldn't we?
Yes.
It was a shame to rush.
It feels a long time.
Because a shame to rush.
Well, we can do it with a tots and drams later for the rest of the world.
Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
So it's another 5-year-old. It's another Australian Apara cask, ex-sherry. 139.95. It's another brand new whiskey discovery for me. So the distillery, located on the Mornington Peninsula near Melbourne, Victoria, was founded by husband and wife Stuart and Naomi McIntosh in 2016 after an inspiring trip to Scotland. Basically, they won a competition that was being run by Chivas, and they had a trip to Scotland and thought, well, our name is Scottish. Why can't we make whiskey? And just get up and go, gung-ho Australian personalities coming through there. Let's just go home and build a distillery, shall we? Their distillery is named Chief's Son after the Scottish Gaelic name for Macintosh. Son of the Chief is what it means. And the name traces back 900 years, hence the name for their core expression, 900 Standard. It's not 900 years old, it's the name that's 900 years old. Now, their wash is, they don't make their own wash. It's sourced from the nearby Mornington Peninsula Brewery, and they have just one 4,000 litre capacity still. It's electrically heated. So this is really a micro distillery with an annual capacity of just 5,000 litres. So it's something similar to that Black Gate, really. I think they were 4,500 to 5,000 litres, weren't they? So it's a 5-year-old single malt whiskey that's been matured in an Australian sherry cask. It's been bottled at 52.1% ABV, and we're expecting just 418 bottles to be available. Now, I think this is lightly peated because I'm getting a little bit of smoke from this, and it is. They didn't say this, but it's definitely coming through with that little bit of smoke there.
Agreed.
Our label story, well, we've got the founders, Stuart and Naomi, tending a barbecue in front of a surf shack on a beach. So very Australian. Their previous lives are told by their clothing. Naomi in a lab coat holding a Bunsen burner, and stewarding military unit. That's their former lives in chemistry, in sciences, and the military. And our deadly animal you can see in the back there is the great Australian great white shark, referred to locally as white pointers. Probably Australia's most feared and misunderstood animal. It manages to inspire an incredible amount of fear and loathing with the general public. And that intense reaction is developed because when a great white does attack a swimmer or a surfer or a spearfisher or a diver, the result is obviously can be horrendous and result in a gruesome death for the victim. But yeah, they're not as common as you think. But yes, it is a misunderstood animal. What's this like? It's big, it's rich, it's malty, and that wood char smoke drifting in and out all the time. There's sort of cigar wood box on the nose, toffee apples, cherry tunes, and just a hint of licorice coming through. It's another rich and mouth-filling whiskey with sort of burnt mint toffees, stewed plums, oak spices, and that, I swear I keep getting this earthy peat coming through. It's not heavily peated, but it's definitely a peated malt. I'm convinced. I haven't had the nod from the distillery on that. This is a cask that we picked and liked, but I think it's their peated malt. It's not a huge monster, but it definitely, that smoke lingers in the background, and it really does come more smoky with a little drop. It doesn't need a drop of water really, but I always put some in when I'm doing the tasting notes because you do get a lot more out of it. It's beautifully balanced. Again, so another of these 5-year-old whiskies that tastes much older than its age.
Yeah, 100%.
A lot more depth to it than you would expect from 5-year if you were doing over here. But and that's down to the quality of the new make spirit that they're making. I mean, some of that smoke may be coming from their electrically heated still. Maybe there's a bit of myad reaction in that as well. I don't know, but it really does have that sort of peaty earthiness on the palate there, right at the back, and that gentle smoke sort of lingers and yeah, delicious.
It's a moment to reflect on just how tough our job is, mate. If only they told us in careers advice, eh? If only they said this was an option. Oh, glorious, beautiful, wonderful. Oh my gosh. Right, so I'm going to quickly just save a little bit for Tots and Drams. This is the cross I have to kind of bear. Oh, there we go. Put that away. Save that for later.
Time for a rum, Peter.
Time for a rum.
Take us to
Thailand. Yeah, so we've got 4 rums in the release. And this final rum is you know, it's not an Australian rum, but this is an opportunity to remind folks of what we have in Bond. And this is a fab sugarcane juice rum. So very happy to bring this all back to your attention. Yeah. Boutique Rum Company is not the oldest company, is it? You know, not as well established as certainly not 10 years old like Boutique Whisky is. So the Isan Distillery is located on the banks of the famous Mekong River, not far from the Laos capital city. And I'm not going to say it. Dave, you probably know it better. How do you say the capital city of Laos?
Of Laos?
Vintain, something like that.
Oh, I've not been to Laos, I must admit.
I thought you might help me out. Either way, this is all the way in the north.
Vientiane, yes. Bit of a French sort of capital.
It is. I mean, there's that kind of influence all going on there. The region of Thailand has ancestral sugarcane varieties that go back a long time, and so it's an obvious place to build a distillery. I feel like I've talked about Isan so much in the past. It kind of feels like it's for me, it's a rum geeky kind of thing to talk about. Isan have used a monovarietal of sugarcane to
Isan.
Isan. Is that am I saying it appropriately? Go on, correct me.
Isan.
Isan.
Mekong.
Mekong. Oh, honestly, I've been corrected so far of so many places around the world.
Oh, this is delicious.
Yeah, it is a fave. We've been talking about this for a while, but it's like we have to kind of like when Boutique Rum launched, we kind of launched, and then all kinds of things kind of happened in the world and stuff like that. And so we have some bottlings that we kind of want to reintroduce because we think they're fantastic, and maybe they didn't get the maybe they didn't get the publicity that we think they should have done to start with. Anyway, this region of Thailand takes ancestral sugarcane varieties. It's a fantastic place to build a sustainable distillery. The producers use a mono variety of sugarcane. This is where it gets geeky. So sugarcane is it's not just one type of sugarcane. It's not like one type of grain, barley, blah, blah, blah. There are varieties. This is specifically a red cane variety, they call it. And it was grown in the 2014, 2015 season. Every stick of sugarcane was peeled by hand because the outer skin of the sugarcane, green part, has its own taste, and they're keen at the producers to capture only the sweet fruity notes of the core. This is a labor of love. 30 kilos of sugarcane yields just 1 liter of rum. The fermentation is 100% sugarcane juice. No water is added. They use a classic yeast strain, much as they use in other agricole rum producing locations. This is the balance. Sugarcane in Thailand is not agricole. French producing parts of the Caribbean has the rights to use the term agricole. This is a conversation we've had many times, and you'll have to look it up. The process of fermentation takes around 3 days. This batch was produced in February 2015, and they produced it on their 400-litre copper pot still. It's a single distillation rather than a double as you might get with some producers. And I think the shape of the still, which is on the label, probably alludes to the fact there's some extra rectification going on in the neck of the still. The rum, as freshly produced, was then rested in stainless steel tanks for 35 months. 35 months. Why not 36 and call it 3 years? Rum producers, eh? Reduction, though, so the distilled strength of 57 to the bottle strength of 40%, and 40% is a Thai law thing, so you can't go above 40% according to Thai law. So slowly adding water to bring it down from 57 to 40%, process carried out in 2018. So this is rested, not aged. Time allows chemistry to happen. Lots of things about maturation that are kind of complex and things, but it's not matured in the cask sense of the word, but it's been rested for a long time. Chemistry happens. For me, as we thought, this is just grassy and fruity, and
it's got
that lovely natural sweetness. Dave and I feel like we've talked about this rum so many times in the past, chap. We've longed to, we've enjoyed it.
Yeah, I've got a bottle here.
It's a thing, so that's why we have a bottle, because this one's an existing bottling. Just rely, we need to let people know the Boutique Rum Company is about long aged and molasses, it's about syrup, it's about representing the whole world of rum, and this is just glorious. There's not many bottles of it left, I have to say, so this is very much, if you're a buyer looking to get it, I would get in early while you can, because once it's gone, it really is gone.
I literally opened my second bottle this morning. This evening. Yeah, this is the second bottle. Yeah, it's lovely. I know, coming, after spending a lot of time in Thailand, it's I feel I had to support it anyway. But it is very, very good, and it has that lovely sort of aroma of green olives on the nose. I must give that little bit of olivey note, which I love.
Sweet. There's so much sweetness in it.
Oh,
and sugar doesn't go through distillation. This is just natural flavors. It's like,
it is that grassy sugar cane on the nose, but there's that green olive note coming through there, which I love. Absolutely love. Yeah,
I think it's wonderful. This is one for the rum explorers. You've got to, I mean, like, we can talk about, once you go down the kind of like the rabbit hole of like sugarcane juice rums, it's very difficult to get back out of it. But like, once you're in, and single cane varieties from a this is I don't know what the word is, single crew. It's kind of like, this is uber geeky. This is never to be done again. It is beautiful. Even if the producers at the distillery did the same thing again, it won't be the same again, because it can't be, because this reflects the growing season. This reflects, the terroir of the location. This reflects so many things, and it's just, oh my God, uber geeky.
That's fabulous. Lovely, lovely stuff.
Regrettably, the label is simplified in terms of like it's just the sugarcane in the process, but like don't underestimate the label. Just get stuck into it. I'm a big fan. I've been a big fan for years. It's so good.
It's a cracker.
Buy it.
What have we got? We got a couple more whiskies to get through, and then a quick overrun on the Scotch whiskies. So it's a welcome return. The next two Australian whiskies you will have seen before. I've got feedback now, which I never had before. Okay, we'll do it anyway. The first one I've got is a Florio. It's our second batch. It's a 3-year-old, a recommended retail price of £145, £144.95. You'll recognise Florio from our first series. Florio is just an hour. I want to go Fleurieu every time, but it's not as Florio or Fleurieu. Just south of Adelaide, about an hour. It's run by a lovely, lovely people, Gareth and Angela Andrews. They really are lovely. They have a huge following in Australia. They're ex-brewers, and being ex-brewers, they work with a variety of malt types, including some that are commonly used to brew real ales. They run an 8-day long fermentation. They use brewers' yeast as opposed to distillers, and their still design is modelled after Gareth's favourite distillery, which is Kalila. There's a noticeable salinity, some of their whiskies, which could be from being next to the sea or some of their peated whiskies. This is a peated whiskey. It's one of their peated malts. Their casks are all named after members of the extended family or characters from famous films. So this second cask from Florio is one of their peated malts. I mentioned it earlier. It's another one of those Australian whiskies that's been matured in an ex-Apera cask. The cask was named Mary Ann Watkins. I have no idea who Mary Ann Watkins is as a character in a movie, because that, or if it's a family member, but that information is coming across to us in a little story, which we will tell a little bit later. It's a 3-year-old that we have bottled at natural cask strength at 65% ABV, and we're expecting just 383 bottles to be available. You can smell the peat and fruit leaking immediately under the nose here. The label story, well, you've seen this label before. It's the story of the steamy enthusiasts train crashing into their distillery. They live in an area which has a lot of tourists down on the shore there, and there's an old steam train that runs in. Their distillery is in one of the old train sheds, and the tracks used to run right through their distillery, and they did have a little accident there. Our deadly animal, you can see clinging, horrific. It's a horrifying sight there. You can see with its sort of laser eyes clinging to the front of that train is the dreaded drop bear. It's our dangerous animal reference. It's a hoax, a contemporary Australian folklore hoax featuring a predatory carnivorous version of the koala. It's one of those tourist stories that they tell, the dreaded drop bear that drops on you from the trees like a deranged koala. So we thought we'd put that on the front of the train there this time. You can also see a little reference that it's a peat smoke. There's a lot more smoke coming out of the steam train, and there's also our Kalila guy driving the train there, Brian Blessed with his wings, and it is peated. It's not heavily peated, but it's a little bit more peated, certainly, that is coming across than that cheap sun that we had earlier. Now that the sherry cask has really put those sort of sweet plums, dark toffee, roasted nuts, and that little smoke is just coming through that sort of iodine sort of peat coming across. On the palate, it's really, you need some water with this, really. I think at 65%, because it's a little hot initially. It's glorious, but I'm going to add a drop of water because I think it really does shine a little bit. There is that sort of deep raisin and fig sweetness, that briny coastal there's unami, there's maltiness, there's a sweet, smoky toffee, dried fruit, and it's really, really complex. And for a 3-year-old whiskey, this is like a 10, 15-year-old Scotch whiskey, one of those distiller's editions that's been matured in a bourbon cask for a number of years and then finished in a sherry or a port, or it just goes on and on. So I'm a big fan of this little distillery, I must admit. What they've been doing is just 8-day ferment, so it's just all about flavor. Everything they're doing is about flavor right from the beginning, which is really, really good stuff. It's beautiful.
It's so rich. It just explosion in the mouth. It's just so much. Oh my God.
And that sort of sweet, spicy, lingering smoke that's starting to turn ashy as it's finishing, and just goes on. It's just surprising for a 3-year-old that you can have such a depth of flavor and length of finish from just 3 years old. It is outstanding. Reflecting the price, £145, and you can compare that to something, some of the 18-year-old Scotch whiskies that are done in a sort of a similar sort of flavor and style and finish and everything. They're charging more than that. This is, I know it's 3 years old, but it's all about, it's about moving it from Australia and everything, but it's also about the quality of that distillate that can be done in a much shorter time span. It's stunning, absolutely stunning. It tastes so much old. Over here, like 15 to 18 years old. You would, if I could put that in a lineup with Scotch whiskies and tell you it was long aged, I would get away with this. I'm telling you. Beautiful.
Absolutely amazing.
It's
That's very good
stuff. I've been blown away by the whole quality levels of this 10 whiskey lineup that I've given here. I only tasted them the other day, the first time, as the samples arrived. It was a wonderful evening of writing all the tasting notes.
Terrible job you have, mate. Terrible job. Okay,
it's time for our last Australian whiskey. It's another one we've seen before, the Whack-A-Mole label, the Whack-A-Wombat label, Riverbourne Distillery. It's one from our first distilleries, located 60 kilometres southeast of the capital, Canberra, run by Australia's oldest distiller, Martin Pye. He's a third-generation pharmacist who has an obsession with the sciences. Now, generally, they distill with 2 types of barley, a heavily peated Scottish malt, which was what we got here in this glass, and the local malt from Australia, which is what we had in our first series. The casks are sourced from an Australian cooperage called Roll Out the Barrel. ROTB. It manufactures casks from recycled wine staves that are stripped and charred in a similar process to the STR, shade toasted with charred casks, of the late Dr. Jim Swan. So a similar sort of process is recycling wine casks to give big fruity flavors to the whiskies. It's something that Jim Swan, who put in distilleries all around the world for allowing distilleries to release whiskey with much more flavor at a much younger age. It lets them get that sort of return on investment much quicker. So this is our second cask from the Riverbourne Distillery. It uses the heavily peated Scottish malt that's been matured in that Roll Out the Barrel 100-litre cask made from American and French oak staves. Now, we bottled this at 51% ABV, and we're expecting just 214 bottles to be available. Now, all of their whiskies are named after films from the Bourne series of books, Identity, Ultimatum, Supremacy, which leads to our label story. Really, it's a Whack-A-Wombat time at Riverbourne, as I mentioned previously. It's sort of the wombats are sort of playing destruction on that on the distillery. They cause in and around the distillery, and so we've got that sort of whack-a-mole going on. And our wombats are all sort of dressed as villains, as in the Bourne series of books and movies, I believe, with that redacted across redacted, because everything's been censored. Now, our deadly animal, and I had to look really closely for our deadly animal, is amongst the wombats, little hive down there, the villains who have stolen just about everything, including a still and bags of barley and peat. But in there is a common death adder. You can just about see it. So I had to look. Where is it? Where's that bloody? It is a common death adder. Yeah, that's what you call a snake that's pretty deadly. The common death adder. It's a species of death adder native to Australia. It's one of the most venomous land snakes in Australia and globally. And human death can occur within 6 hours after the bite.
God, so 6 hours is that?
That's pretty quick. And if you remember our first Riverborn, it's a big and chewy whiskey, and this is once again one of those big, chewy whiskies. On the nose, there's sort of an immediate sort of iodine hit. It's slightly earthy, slightly medicinal, but if you just give it a wee shake and certainly a little touch of water, and it really does sort of bring out those heather honey. Because this is peat that's come from Scotland, the malt that's come from Scotland. And there's sort of a tangerine sort of note on the nose, sort of tangerine creams. Now, this is just 2 years old. So we've got the malt spirit again. 2 years old with a heavily peated malt, you're going to get a lot of that really fresh peat coming through. It is big and chewy. There are waves and waves of sweet smoke, candied citrus, creamy vanilla toffees, and as you sit back, and it's sort of followed by that earthy peatiness and just a touch of salt. It is a pretty long-lasting finish. That's down to the quality of the peated malt that we're getting, and it's heavily peated, so it will linger for a long, long time. And a little bit of salinity to it, and in that earthy peat smoke that finishes. It is an absolute cracker. So that is our headliners. What do you think, Pete?
That Riverborn is fantastic.
It is.
Generally, that is fantastic. 2 years old? No way. Do not believe it.
It's a whiskey in Australia. It is a whiskey in Australia. It will be a whiskey in the US, just not over this side.
Oh my God.
It's a cracker. So
very good. Very, very good. Honestly, Oz feels like it's a place. We got to go there, mate. Come on. Can we do a road trip? Can we do it? Can we get a boat?
Lots and drams on the road.
Whatever.
There are lots of distilleries in Australia these days, like 300 and something. It's incredible. Okay, so that's our themed release, our headliners. And as you know, every themed release is accompanied by some banging Scotch whiskies. And we certainly won't be disappointing you with our Return to Oz collection. We are presenting 7 succulent Scotch whiskies. And I sat down and tasted and wrote the tasting notes for these the other night. It's 2 you've seen before. 5 you haven't. It's a long-awaited batch, a second batch of our blended whiskey number 3, one of our black labels with the white gloved hands. It's a 26-year-old. It is absolutely beautiful. There is a long-aged 25-year-old single grain from the Invergordon distillery. There are 3 single malts from Speyside, a 13-year-old Craigellachie, a 16-year-old Glen Elgin, and as you know in my books, Glen Elgin cannot do any wrong, and so that will be dreadful. So it's all coming to me, and a 24-year-old from an undisclosed distillery that you've seen before, Speyside number 3, adorned with my favourite label. I've even had the mouse mat made. From the Highlands, we've got beautiful 21-year-old Macduff. And from Isla, there's a 6-year-old Kalila. For more details of these bottlings, you can be found on our Return to Oz sell deck. And all of these releases will be available for a global launch whenever that sell deck tells us it's available. Obviously, as custom with these boutique releases, once they're gone, they are gone. They are just small batches. So if you've got samples, please enjoy them. If there are any questions about the whiskies or rums or brandy, please do not hesitate to talk to either Pete or myself. It is a seriously cracking collection of whiskies.
God, just how bad. Like seriously, though, that was like 14 fabulous glasses of booze. I am so happy.
I know. I'm a big fan of this sort of Isan rum style. I must admit that I had to have it because it was Thailand. I spent a lot of years there. All my kids were born in Thailand, so we had to have that anyway. That's just got to be a staple in the house. But yes, the other three Australian rums, stunning, beautiful,
wonderful. Right, so should we sign off?
We should sign off now. Thanks for watching.
Ciao, ciao. Bye bye.